All right, for math notes today, we're going to turn to our table of contents like we always do first. Remember, we do not skip lines in our table of contents. We're going to write powers of 10. And we're going to take 2 pages of notes today. So you're going to write page 6 and 7 for powers of 10. Once you have that written down in your table of contents, you can turn to page 6 and 7. Remember, you need to put a page number on it wherever you're putting your page numbers, whether it's on the bottom, on the top, left, right, doesn't matter. But you can see I went ahead and put page 6 and page 7 on there. Find this journal page. This is the page that's going to go on to page 6. And go ahead and glue it down on page 6. Make sure that you don't cover up wherever you wrote page 6. So we've been multiplying and dividing by 10, 100, 1,000. We're going to look at an easier way to write that instead of writing 100 or 1,000 or 10,000. We're going to look at an easier way to write it. So before we do this, I'm going to write some notes here, but this doesn't have to go on your journal page. It's just what I want you to something I want you to see. I'm going to relate it to text messaging. So laughing out loud. I'm sure whenever you text someone that you're laughing out loud, you don't write out the words laughing out loud. You probably write LOL. Okay? So that's a shorter way to write laughing out loud. That's what we're going to look at for powers of 10. It's a shorter way to write something. So I'm going to give you 2 examples before we actually start our notes. 10 to the second power is a shorter way to write 10 times 10. And we should all know that 10 times 10 is 100. Now, while we're just looking at it today for powers of 10, which means our base number here is always going to be a 10, you can use these little bitty exponents to, you can use these exponents on any base number. For example, if I was going to do 3 to the second power, that would be 3 times 3. Now, a lot of students would tell me 3 to the second power is 6 because they're doing 3 times 2. That's not what this is. It is 3 times itself 2 times. So 3 times 3 is actually 9. Let's do one more. So let's use the same base number 3, but this time I'm going to do it to the third power. It's not 3 times 3. It's 3 times 3 times 3. So 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 more is 27. So instead of writing 3 times 3 times 3, I can write 3 to the third power, and it means the same thing. It's a shorter way to write it. So that's what we're going to be looking at today, is shorter ways to write large numbers. Just so happens today it's all going to be powers of 10, so our base number is all going to be 10. But in the future, in 5th grade, you can have different base numbers. All right, so now to our journal notes. I want you somewhere on the page, I'm going to do mine up here in the corner next to this power of 10. I want you to write, we'll do 10 to the second power. I want you to label this as base number and this as exponent. Those are some vocabulary words that you should be familiar with. The base number is the big number. The exponent is the smaller number that's written in the right-hand corner. All right, so we're going to fill in this chart. 10 to the 6th power is 10 times itself 6 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They multiplied 10 6 times. That is 1 million. The way we write that is 1 million over 1 in fraction form, and the place value is millions. All right, so 10 to the 5th power. That would be 10 times itself 5 times. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, they told you, is 100,000. You write it in fractions as 100,000 over 1, and the place value is 100,000. 10 to the 4th power is 4 groups of 10. 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. That's going to be 10,000. Fraction form is going to be 10,000 over 1, and the place value is 10 thousandths. 10 to the 3rd power, 3 groups of 10. 10 times 10 times 10. That's 1,000. It's 1,000 over 1, and the place value is 1,000. 10 to the 2nd power is 10 times 10. That's 100. It's 100 over 1, and it's the hundreds place. They did the whole thing there for you. 10 to the 1st power is 10. Decimal form is just 10. Fraction form is 10 over 1, and the place value is the tens place. 10 to the 0 power. Any number times 0 power is equal to 1. So it doesn't matter if it's 10 to the 0 power, 7 to the 0 power, 1 million to the 0 power, it's going to be equal to 1. So the decimal form is 1. The fraction form is 10 over 10. Remember from a previous video, I told you this line meant divide. So if we divide 10 divided by 10, that's the same as 1 whole, and it is the ones place. Further down, we have some negative place values. For the purposes of this week, you're not actually going to use these negative powers of 10, but for the purposes of later on in the year, you will use these. So we're going to go ahead and go over them, but just know that these will be the ones you will see this week. Also, before we go on to those negative exponents, let's talk about these for just a second. So we know that 10 to the 3rd power is a shorter way of writing 10 times 10 times 10, or a shorter way to write 1,000. So I hope that you've noticed that 1,000 has 3 zeros and your exponent is 3. 1 million has 6 zeros and your exponent is 6. That only works for powers of 10. It does not work if your base number is something different. But for powers of 10, your exponent will tell you how many zeros are in your standard number. All right, so let's look at our negative exponents now. So we had 10 to the 0 power was 1. So 10 to the negative 1st power is 1/10, which is 1/10 as a decimal, 1/10 as a fraction, and is the tenths place. 10 to the negative 2nd power would be 1 over 10 times 10, because we want 10 times itself 2 times. That is actually 1/100th. It's written as 1/100th as a fraction, and it is the hundredths place. Hundredths. 10 to the negative 3rd is 1 over 10 times 10 times 10, which is 1,000th, which is written as 1 over 1,000 as a fraction, and it is the thousandths place. 10 to the negative 4th power is 1 over 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. That is 1/10,000th. 1/10,000th as a fraction, and the place value is 10 thousandths. 10 to the negative 5th is 1 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tens multiplied by itself. It's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3. Squeeze that 1 in there. So that is 100,000th. It's going to be 100 thousandths, and the place value is 100 thousandths. Notice how many zeros are in this number, and how many zeros are in this number, and how many tens there are how many your exponent is. The negative numbers are going to give you a decimal answer, whereas the positive exponents are going to give you a whole number. Our last one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1/1 millionth, 1/1 millionth, and it is going to be the millionths place. Make sure all of your negative place values end in THS and your whole number place values do not end in THS. So that is our first lesson on powers of 10. Our second journal page that we're going to do today looks like this. So you want to find that page and then glue it down to page 7 in your notebook. Oops. All right, so the reason that we talked about these powers of 10 is because it's a shorter way to look at multiplying and dividing. Instead of having to write 1,000 or 10,000, you can just write 10 to the third power or 10 to the fourth power. Also, something on this journal page, this talks about moving the decimal point. On our previous journal pages, 4 and 5, we moved the digits, but now we're moving the decimal point. So if I'm going to, see, all of these are multiplication. So if I'm going to multiply by 10, we know it's going to move one time. Now the digit, if I was going to move the digit would move left, but I'm not moving the digit. I want to move the decimal. So you can see here, they tell you the decimal moves to the right. So 6/10 times 10 is 6 ones. You can put your decimal at the end of it. You don't have to. Even if you don't see that decimal at the end of a number, remember it's still there. All right, 6/10, same number we're starting with, times 10 to the second power. This time, that 10 times 10, that's 2 tens, that's 100, and I want to move the decimal 2 times. So you can see here they moved it 1, 2 times, but what did they forget to put right here? Whenever we move our decimal point and we have an empty place, we need to put a placeholder. So we use a 0 for our placeholder. So that is 60. You can put a decimal at the end, but remember you don't have to because it's always understood to be at the end. 6/10 times 10 to the third power, that's 10 times 10 times 10, or 1,000. So we want to move it 3 times. So they moved it 1, 2, 3 times, but they forgot their placeholders. So that is 600. 6/10 times 10 to the fourth power, we're going to move it 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't forget your placeholders, and that is 6,000. The only difference between what we did here and what we're going to do here is instead of moving our decimal point to the right so that our value increases, we're going to move our decimal to the left so that our value decreases. Also, something that's different here, if you look at these, you'll think that none of them have decimal points. But remember, they all do have decimal points. They're at the end. Also, some students confuse this right here. They think that is a decimal. That is actually a comma. That's 4,523. Maybe if I zoom in some, you can see how that has like a little tail on it, and decimals are complete dots, not little tails. So you need to make sure when you're making your decimal, it's a nice big fat dot, not anything that has a tail on it. Let me zoom back out. Don't think we need to be quite that close. All right, so 4,523 divided by 10, I'm going to move it 1 time to the left so it's smaller. So I have 452 and 3/10, which we can agree that 452 and 3/10 is smaller than 4,523. If we just compared those fours, the value of those fours, 4,000 is 400s is less than 4,000. All right, so this time we're going to divide it by 10 to the second power, which means we're going to move our decimal point 2 times. You can see they did that for you, 1, 2. So it's 45 and 23 hundredths. Make sure your decimals are big fat dots. They don't have tails, because then they'd be a comma. 4,523 divided by 10 to the third, they moved it 1, 2, 3 times. 4 and 523 thousandths. We're dividing by larger powers of 10 each time, and our answer is getting smaller each time because when you divide by a larger number, you get smaller pieces. So finally, we divided it by 10 to the 4th power, or 10,000. So we moved it 4 times, and that's 4,523 10,000ths. So at this point, I would like you to pause the video. I would like you to try to do 3 and 4 on your own. All of 3 is multiplication. Remember, it said you're moving the decimal point. Okay, so the decimal point for multiplication is going to move to the right, just like we did in these examples up here. And all of number 4 is division, so the decimal point for division is going to move to the left, just like it did for these up here. So I want you to pause the video, answer these, and then you can unpause the video and see how well you did. So hopefully you gave these a shot and you did well. You can see every time I moved the decimal, this here was the comma, this over here was the decimal. I crossed it off, moved it 1 time. Crossed it off, moved it twice, moved it 3 times. Now here, I didn't feel like I had enough room to work it out here. That's why I wrote it again. I was already running into my multiplication sign there. So I worked it out here so that I could swoopy that decimal and move it the correct number of times, which was 4 times, since I was multiplying it by 10,000. And you can see I wrote my answers here, and I made sure to use commas to separate my periods. Remember, each group of 3 numbers is called a period. And then for division, I moved the decimal right 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, and 4 times. I did have to add a placeholder here. These zeros, if you left off those zeros and you just put decimal 85932 and decimal 0.85932 on those last 2, that is still an acceptable answer. But you cannot forget this 0 here. You can eliminate the 0 in the front, but you can't eliminate the 0 between the decimal and the 8. We are now going to do problem set and homework for lesson 3. You are going to write the first few problems in exponential form. That means you're going to write them with a base number of 10 and an exponent of however many you need to get the same answer. The second section, you're going to practice like we did in our math journal, where you multiply or divide by a power of 10. So that means you're going to move the decimal either left or right, depending on if you're multiplying or dividing, so you can get your answer. You have a couple of word problems to answer. You also have some patterns. I'm going to give you a hint. These patterns are either multiplying or dividing by powers of 10. Once you figure out what the pattern is, if it's multiplication or division, you can go ahead and fill in the rest of the pattern. And then, of course, the back, it's the same thing, just more practice problems for you. You need to do both sides.